Hello, my name is Codemaster Jamal, and welcome to the 18th devlog for my 3D monster collecting MMORPG, Virtual Monsters. I have a lot of stuff to show you guys in regards to the game, but for now we will focus on one asset I created for the game. Today I'm going to show you guys how I turned this drawing into this 3D model to use in my monster collecting game. This is Gal, a 3D model that I created for my game Virtual Monsters. This monster belongs to the canine species and is a starter monster you can acquire in the beginning of the game. I've created a web page to display more information about the game if you are interested. You can check out the virtual decks, move decks, chip libraries, system protocols, and more by visiting the link on the screen or checking out the link below in the description. The pages are not fully fleshed out yet, but I will get to filling out the pages very soon with helpful information about the game. I will eventually turn on registrations for the website, and you guys will be able to register accounts as I want to get this game into beta testing in the following months. So let's show you guys how I make monsters for my indie game. The first thing I like to do when making monsters is that I start off concepting. I usually pull inspiration from cartoons and movies. When I thought of the concept of making another virtual monster, at first I wanted to make Demi-Monko because Enzor and Demi-Monko were the first monsters I mentioned in the game's dialogue text. Although as time went on and I began to work on the virtual decks, I decided to add monsters to the game based on their virtual dex number. And since I had already prepared a virtual dex many ages ago, the next monster to add to the game was Gal. Enzo, of course, was influenced by Agumon from Digimon, so my influence for Gal, of course, was Gabumon. I would also like to say I was influenced by Tiger from Monster Rancher, as it has a similar color scheme and theme around it. As for its body, I wanted to keep it simple, much like Enzor. I wanted to use a ball for the shape of the body, mainly because I knew that it would be easy for me to model in Blender later. I also wanted it to have arms to punch and jab with. I wanted to give it enough features like a nose and ears and a tail to basically flesh out more of its canine-like features. I never talked about it much, but I wanted the battle system of this game to be more reminiscent of a fighting game. There would be a bit of competitive boxing in this RPG to give the game a bit of spice. But it's funny because what I'm drawing today is sort of a canine monster, so like my best reference is this dog they left for me. So I'm cleaning up a few lines. I scrap that design. So I'm going to keep with the design, especially how they use the shape. Okay, so I was working on this design, but I realized I was doing a little bit too much detail, and I worked on this one here. I hope you guys kind of get the general concept. I should probably make the arms a little shorter. Once the drawing was done, it was time to scan it into my computer and then create some line art. At this point, I wasn't actually sure how I was going to go about the color scheme. I had a few ideas, but nothing was entirely final at this time. It had been a while since I made a monster for the game, but I remembered the process enough to complete it a second time. The main goal was to make the size reference similar to that of the first monster. If I could achieve that, I would have created this sort of singularity or flow to the game. The game would look like itself instead of looking like Pokemon or Dragon Ball Z or some other franchise. I basically had to recreate art that I hadn't done in 2 years. I literally hadn't drawn anything in years either. I was completely nervous about doing this again, but for some reason I made it look a lot easier than what it actually was. This was difficult, not because I didn't know what I was doing. I had not did this in a long time either. Although, because I decided to keep pushing forward instead of stopping and trying something else, I eventually saw that I could get it done, and I could get it done with ease. I had the power to get it done, I just needed to try a bit harder. Once the line art was done, I could start coloring it in. Before, I had this idea of having multiple versions of a monster you could obtain, like the different skins wouldn't have any special qualities to it other than it being a different version of the monster, but it would be a cool thing to collect in the game, like different skins and stuff like that for each monster. I've decided to scrap that idea because it would take a long time for me to color and design each individual skin for each monster. There might be a solution to this using Unity's shader graph, which I happened to upgrade my project to recently. But for now, there will only be 2 color schemes. One scheme will be unique for the tamers who acquire this monster as a starter, and another color scheme for when the monster isn't a starter. I'm going to repeat this design with all of the monsters from here on out. Now that we have our 2D artwork done and we know this monster is supposed to look in the game, we can now start to sculpt our monster. We can finally bring it to life and make it an asset in our game. This was difficult, but around this time I began contemplating on if I should have actually just made this a 2D game instead of a 3D game, as I realized my drawing skills are actually good enough to get this game done as a 2D game probably a little bit quicker. That being said, I kind of wanted this game to be a little bit more modernized, so I'm sticking with 3D. I found this part of making the monster to be the most relaxing actually, which is actually 3D modeling the monster itself. The first part was getting the shape of the body down. We need the 2D drawing I just made as a reference. This helps keep all of the monsters a certain size. As I said before, I knew a spear-shaped monster would be easier for me to model, so that's why I chose such a simple shape for the monster. Once I got the shape done, it was just a matter of making the ears, arms, and tail. You know, the parts of it that makes it look like a dog. Now, once I got to this part, I got stuck for a bit as I wanted to make the monster's teeth and claws, but I didn't entirely know what was the best method. I thought about making separate meshes, but this would drastically increase the vertex count for the model. I am trying to keep the vertex count as low as possible for the models of my game, as lower vertex counts means fewer vertices, fewer faces, and thus less polygons for a device to calculate. The lower amount of faces, the faster any machine can calculate how many triangles are in a model, and thus we render things a lot quicker. I'm not sure how programming for cross multiplayer works, but for now I need to keep this game running as fast as possible with as few drops in frame rate as possible. This brought up a serious question as I let my followers decide which model I should go with. One looked cooler, but the vertex count was much too high for my game. The other was good as well, but it just didn't look as cool as the other. Most scholars would probably tell me that the uglier one was better, but the other one was too cool to let go. Fortunately, I happened to stumble across some tools that would let me create circles out of the faces on the mesh. These tools were known as loop tools, which was already something that came with Blender. I knew I needed a cylindrical shape, but I didn't entirely know how to get that out of the model. Well, thanks to loop tools, I was able to create a circle out of the topology and just extrude the shape of the teeth and claws. It took me a while to get it the way I wanted, but once it was done, I could put the finishing touches on the model and then move on to starting the rigging for the monster. I usually do this after I UV edit the model, but for some reason I just decided that this was the next thing to do. Boning and rigging the monster was actually pretty easy, but I may go back and do it again. I know that the tail is how I want it, but I may change the face and how the spines and hips are. The next thing was weight painting. Now, like I said before, I usually do this after I UV edit, but this was fairly easy as well. You have to get used to the new tools in Blender 2.9, like using the shift key to select the bone, and then turning the strength to 0 in order to erase things. But once you get used to that, weight painting in Blender is a fairly easy job. I thought that I needed to retopologize the model at first due to the fact that I couldn't get the bone to influence the mesh how I wanted, but once I gave it a second try, I got the mesh to deform the way I wanted, and then I can move on to the final steps, which is UV editing and texture painting the model. UV editing is very unique, and I never thought I would do any of this type of stuff live. It took a while, but I learned a lot of things from watching Blender Guru over the years. The controls for it in edit mode are rather simple, and my trick is hiding the seams of the model and figuring out how each piece of the model could be laid out flat in 2D. Once I had that picture in my mind, I could figure out where to cut the model, and everything else was pretty easy. Once the scenes were laid down, I took a look at the islands they created. I kept messing around with the UVs until I got a layout that I thought was right. Then I organized the islands on the UV map in order to give myself more space to paint on certain pieces. I knew that I needed more space to paint out the face of the monster, so I made those pieces bigger than the others, like the teeth and claws. Once the islands were laid out, I began texture painting. When I did my texture painting in 3 parts. The first part was laying down a basic code or layout for the monster. I needed to put down the primary colors of the monster. I don't do a lot of shading, and I don't also do a lot of highlights within my monsters. Those type of things could also be attained with cartoon shaders, which I'm actually trying my best to avoid using in my game. But other than that, they didn't require any additional detail. Once that was done, I needed to add the initial features of the monster. This included the black circles on the mouth, the nose, and the pink ears, as well as the green eyes. These were all made in Krita or Blender. Once we have these features, I then needed to add the final detail of Gal, which is the zigzag pattern that goes across its coat. This was the final step, which was actually a lot harder than I thought. At first, I thought I was going to make a pattern that was random and had no form of sequence or flow to it, but eventually I started to sharpen up the zigzags and make them more uniform and calculated, or at least as calculated as possible. I actually made the zigzags by using the line tool inside of Blender and just drawing the lines on the actual model. I would refer to the UV island view when I wanted to make the lines appear seamless, but other than that, I didn't really do too much actual painting on the texture itself. Paint.net is also good with flipping certain designs and putting them in the proper position. Creating these textures actually took 3 programs being open at once. And could you believe that my computer crashed while I was working on the design? Once this part was over with, my monster was alive. I knew that by the time I was done, I had solidified what would be noticed in the future as a virtual monster style of monsters, or at least I hoped it to be. This is the monster in Unity. I haven't recorded much of this monster, but the next thing would be to finish the character creation system and then to start working on animations for the monsters. From there, I want to test out the battle system and try beta testing a few things with a few close friends. I'd also like to take this time to say thank you for 500 subscribers. This is really great, and I really could not have done it without you guys. I'm going to keep developing, trying to produce some cool game development tutorials, and I hope to keep moving and finish this game. This was a milestone I wanted to surpass last year, but I couldn't do it due to my inconsistent upload schedule. But thank you guys for leaving comments, subscribing to my channel, even when I haven't uploaded anything in weeks, and thanks for sticking around as well. I was able to make it here really because of all of you guys and you guys not giving up on me, and I really appreciate that. I hope to take this YouTube channel to the next step. The next goal for this channel is to make it to 1,000 subscribers. At my current rate, I'm probably gaining like 100 subscribers a year, so this will probably take about 4 years. But regardless, I'm going to still push forward and, continue to upload, and you never know what will happen in the future. In regards to virtual monsters, my next goal is to get this game into beta testing. I will discuss more information about beta testing in a later video, but for now, the initial form of beta testing will be with close friends of mine. I just want to test people logging into the game, creating a character, walking around the overworld, and then battling other players. Once this is done, I will flesh out the remaining features of the game, and then we will move into more beta testing and eventually a full release of the game. Well, I guess this will be it for now. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and comment your thoughts about the game. Keep making games. Till next time, this is Codemaster Jamal, and I'm signing out.